I think they're coming to the realization how expensive that will be. And so I think this notion that instead of allowing them to do it and then the market will cover the rest is really put that choice back and say, look, here's the fairly significant choice you need to make. And if you're going to subsidize, you have to pay the full freight for the subsidized unit. You can't get revenue out of the market, you can't share and have the distortions. You have to either set it aside or not. And I think that's the way forward, is to put that choice, or as opposed to accommodate, more or less say, look, if you're going to do it, you got to pay the full cost. And that's the discussion we're having right now. If we lose that argument, then I think it is going to be very difficult to sustain by. Then I think we're down to some type of mechanism, the second best, third best.
So I will comment that one of the things that raises is the issue of public discourse, because we certainly find in New England that the environmental community has a very large voice, but actually doing the math and the economics of the consequences is often lost. So I think we have a real challenge there to make sure that the public understands the costs and the benefits.
Barney, I was just going to add one other thing in, and to add to what Andy said, which is the other problem is the political cycle is every 2 years. I mean, you have governors in New England running for, in many of the states, every 2 years. Congressmen and women running every 2 years. And so the problem with these markets is they require some long-term continuity. And so that burden comes to rest on the ISOs, but importantly the FERC. And so I think the FERC's job is to get dramatically more difficult and complicated. It already has, and it will remain that way, I think, for the foreseeable future. The point that Andy also made, which is the efficiency gains that have been achieved at the wholesale market have essentially been captured at the retail level through all of these other programs. And so I think we're entering a world now in the next 10 years where we're going to see both wholesale costs and more retail cost increases. So there's only one direction for cost, which is up. And that's going to make life very difficult from a political point of view.
Yeah, just on that point, FERC, a lot of this does rest. I don't think anybody sees.
Thank you for speaking to the mic more.
I'm sorry. Is that good? Yeah. So a lot of this does rest with FERC. I don't think that the states, there's some states that are very supportive of these markets that are going to come back up. But ultimately, there was an appeals court decision came out of the Seventh Circuit Court now. And effectively, the outcome decided in the federal state jurisdiction is that the U.S. government and FERC asked and said, we've got all the tools we need to deal with this dilemma. And so now we're waiting to see what FERC's going to do. But the important thing in all of these markets, there are issues that are open and not that we need to get too specific. But the issue is that if states do not like the market construct they're a part of, they absolutely 100% have the right to leave the market construct and go back to an integrated resource plan and regulate the state. So I do think at a certain point, FERC is going to have to decide, with input from these guys, at what point is the competitive market not going to work, and they're going to stand around, and FERC's going to stand around, the states can do what they want to, because clearly they they're right. So it will be fascinating to see.
Thank you.
Again, I'm more optimistic, I think, than they are. That FERC is going to step up. Well, maybe we'll see.
We'll see. One follow-up at this time. Let me just ventilate a little bit this issue that at the end of the day we have to migrate to one of the poles. One of the issues that certainly has come up from our interaction with some of our different groups is, why couldn't there be a residual market? Why couldn't you have a situation where you have some set of assets that are government supported and respond to government policy, and then you essentially have, frankly, what would end up being a fossil fleet that would compete in wholesale markets and happens to be able to set its price in accordance with what's necessary for those fossil plants to be able to stay in the market. Why is that so unworkable in your view?
Well, I think that's okay in some aspect if the rules are clearly understood and if they're going to work. Because the whole concept is people have to decide if they're going to invest capital. And if we're going to build a new power plant or buy a power plant, and the view is the market's going to be a third the size in the next 5 years, you're not going to build a new power plant. You can only buy a plant at a huge discount. So the point is you have to attract and retain capital. And look, if you said we're going to set aside 20% of the market for whatever the government wants to do, and the 80% is going to be embedded, if you're going to look at that over time, that will absolutely affect that. But we're not living in that kind of, the world's a lot more dynamic though.
Fair enough, okay.
So,
Yes, please.
I'd also say it depends on what what the objective is of the residual market. So if the objective of the residual market is to maintain the investment incentive, that's one thing, and that's going to be very difficult, as Dan has described. The other model would be the residual market is nothing more than paying for the resources that already exist over time, as you transition to a whole set of new resources that are being contracted for the old way, essentially through long-term contracts. So I think that's going to be the big conundrum. The whole point of these markets was to try and shift the investment risk away from consumers towards investors. Once one abandons that principle, I think then you can essentially you're back into just another form of regulation.
No, but I actually do think, you're right, I do think it becomes regulation, because we have, it's not unjust and unreasonable if we don't have a chance for return on capital. You cannot just pay us or go forward capital, given the investments that we make. So whatever the residual market is, will have to be constructed to provide that kind of return, so, which is pretty complicated.
Andy, PJM. You guys benefit from probably some of the cheapest gas prices in the country. You know better than I, but it must be from like 20 or 25,000 megawatts of coal plants closed to PJM. What's something in that vicinity? It's a lot.
More than that.
More than that, okay. And at least a lot of people in this audience have heard various times different forecasts for natural gas prices. And the general sense is they are not going up appreciably for a very long time. So tell us more about your view of the trajectory of PJM's mix here. Is this going to really shift almost where we'll see a relentless continuing closure of coal plants and a relentless continuing construction of gas plants? And then somewhat provocatively may ask, is there anything to worry about that outcome if that in fact is what the market brings?
Yeah, I do, I'll say slow progression. Like I said, most of the small coal plants, in fact, I'll probably say all of them are already gone. So the ones that are left tend to be very big, very efficient. Some of them are still making money, some of them are in trouble financially. So I do see of the, whatever, 40,000 megawatts we have left over time, they're going to all go. To put a boiler, like to do major capital investment back in a coal plant, like every 8 to 10 years they got to do a complete overhaul. Probably going to be tough to do that, but that'll burn it over the next 10 years. As far as nuke, you're starting to see some of the nuke go. In my opinion, some of them are putting in what I would call politically driven retirement notices as opposed to economically driven. So I don't think all of those will necessarily go. We have about 4,500 megawatts currently saying they're going to retire by 2022. That's out of 30,000. So I do think you're going to see the nuke fleet continue for quite a while, even without any kind of intervention, because I think economically they'll be able to hold in there. So it is nuke gas, and I think unless something changes technology-wise, I think we get more and more gas over time, not abruptly. I don't think it's a problem. I think the gas infrastructure needs to be built up to take care of it, and I think it can be. We have a lot more pipelines. We have like 32 interstate pipelines in PJM. Infrastructure is not our problem. We have a lot of infrastructure. We have a lot of new gas units that are sitting on well pads. Talk about fuel security. The fuel comes right out of the ground. There's no transportation. So I don't see it as a problem. It's just a change. Politically, it's a problem because effectively, if you close a nuke plant, the school in a community basically can't fund the schools. So you got to figure it out.
So when we invite you back here 10 years from now, and you should put the slide up of the mix of energy, how much do you see coming from gas at that point?
No, we're probably over 50%. Today we're at 27% production. Probably about, I think, 35 or 36% capacity, I think it is. So we're probably looking at approaching 50% in the production range. The But again, I think there's parts of the world that have that kind of dependency. And again, a gas plant, just because it burns gas, in our case, doesn't mean it's the same. I mean, you have the wellhead gas, you have the interstate pipe gas, you have, I don't know if we have any LNG, but we might. But the point is there's a fair amount of diversity. Oil backup, yeah, whatever they burn back up. So I think there's a fair amount of diversity within the gas fleet, and we're fine.
All right. You had said in your talk that there was some discussion of tweaking things to encourage fuel diversity, and I'm trying to square that. Maybe I missed something, but I want to square that statement with what you just said.
Here's the point. We have a vulnerability. New England has it worse than we do, but we have it too. If we have sustained cold weather and we have some type of event, we will get to a point where all the people switching to liquid fuel backup will not have enough burn hours to allow us to serve the load. So we basically, their on-site fuel storage might be 70 hours of operation or whatever it is, pick a number. It's not enough. So what we'll say is we're going to require, all right, a fuel replenishment plan for those types of backups, or another type of fuel secure resource, which could be nuke, coal, wellhead gas, whatever, for a certain amount. So they will say 80% of our fleet has to be fuel secure, period. And we'll pay for it. It'll be an adder on the capacity market or the energy market, depending. But that's what we need to do to make sure we don't get to a situation, 10 years from now where we can't sustain.
Okay. One more question I'll ask before turning it to the audience. We talked a lot about capacity markets, and Gordon particularly on the importance of it. We also have one region of the country that has no capacity market and is a vibrant energy market only, which is Texas with ERCOT. Thad, you're in the middle of that market. How viable is that energy-only world, you feel, in the long term? I say that particularly with the fact that you do have tens of thousands now of megawatts of wind coming in on socialized, subsidized transmission lines from the Panhandle. How do you see that evolving, and do you think that's stable, or are you more in Gordon's camp that a capacity market is essential for the continuing success of the markets?
So I do think an energy market with some modifications is viable in Texas. The difference in Texas is that the state, and there's one policy maker, one decision maker effectively, which is the state itself. And the outer market things that we're talking about, these other markets, large RFPs, importing hydro from Canada or bailing out nukes, will not happen. If they do, the energy market in Texas will not work. There's, just to give an example though, of the commitment right now in the energy market, the reason you can kind of bank on it, there's an example of what's happening right now in PJM with Missile, which is a power plant. It's needed for.
I assume New England, but
What did I say?
you said PJ.
I'm sorry, I said
Gordon wishes you were correct, I can assure you.
Okay, well, the RMRs in California, it really doesn't matter which example you use, but you had our market action comes in and it takes the power plant, and then that very power plant that had to get saved by the outer market action then suppresses prices for all the other generators, which then doubles the problem down. In Texas, if there's an outer market action in RMR, that plant is actually not dispatched unless the price is at the actual market cap, which is $9,000 a megawatt hour. So ERCOT actually has a tool, if they have to, come in and take outer market action. And there's the political will that when they take the action, there's no suppressive effect at all on the rest of the market when they're taking the action. That's a simple example, but that does not exist in any of these other organized markets. Or if you take outer market action, it suppresses it. So there's a commitment and a will and a single political entity to make decisions versus multi-state and separate RFPs. The renewables are subsidized coming into Texas, and there are some issues that's caused. But I'm pretty confident we can make some tweaks around the edges that are technical, and I won't bore anybody into it, to actually make that work. But actually making an energy market work in a multi-jurisdictional situation with different political entities, interfering with the market in different ways, just cannot work. The only thing we regionally can build is capacity.
You would tend to agree with that, wouldn't you, Gordon?
Yeah, so I've thought about this a lot because there are days when I want to abandon the capacity market. So, because it just seems easier. But I think you said it, and I'll just reinforce it, which is I think one needs the right political environment in which to do an energy-only market. You need one regulator who's going to make sure that the interferences that you spoke of don't occur. And I think there needs to be a tolerance for extreme volatility because, you know, the investment incentive is driven through this unpredictable energy spike that's going to happen at some point in the future. And I think so going with that thought, you can't have a situation where the regulator is essentially trying to hedge load, which is really what's happening in the northeastern states. So you have to say to load that you're exposed. There's going to be no saving you if that spike comes and you haven't actually hedged yourself by entering into a contract with a load-serving entity that's signed up with real generation. So you've got to set that whole system up, and I think the problem is how do you do that in a multi-state environment? It's very difficult.
I think one of the things that should be apparent to the audience is that even though these gentlemen work in the world of markets and structures, and very much the question of the details of that, there's an underlying political framework that we're all very sensitive to, and we have to be successful within that as well. With that, let me turn over to questions. I think there's a microphone there, so people should stand up and try to use the mic best.
Look at that, cute.
A queue, a line.
Sinan Küfoğlu, Energy Policy Research Group, University of Cambridge. The cost of renewables is going down, the cost of storage is going down, a digital revolution is taking place. And in the future, many customers, or even worse, many regions as microgrids might be self-sufficient, and people will be able to trade power peer-to-peer. So do you feel threatened by these developments?
So I don't. I think you're right about the trend line that renewables is getting cheap. Renewables are getting cheaper, that storage will come down, but I don't see a world where you'll be able to live without the grid. So I know there are people out there that believe you can just live off a distributed resource environment. I'm not one of them. I look around our region and say, I don't see how are you going to serve a city like Boston through distributed resources, or a city like New York. It's impossible. You can do it in a rural environment perhaps, but I think we're going to need the grid as the means to move the renewable energy around. If you think about where the region is heading next, which is to take the carbon out of heating and transportation, that's a massive amount of renewable energy that will be required. It's going to have to be put onto the grid. Some of it will come from local distributed type resources, but I think the bulk of it's going to come through grid-scale renewable energy that's going to have to be moved through the transmission system. So if you accept that premise, then the issue then is how do you balance the variability that will be there? And I think storage for the foreseeable future is going to be limited duration discharge. I mean, the prevalent technology is lithium ion. It looks like it's dominant for the next decade. You may get flow batteries and so forth coming on in the long-term future, but the issue is how do you get through 2 weeks of cold on a 4-hour lithium-ion battery? It's not possible. So I think we have to, in the end, accept there will be conventional generation that has the right performance attribute to be able to balance the grid. And so I don't feel threatened about it. I think there's job security at the ISO forever. The real problem, though, is are we going to be able to do this holistically through a market, or do these markets really become mechanisms for dispatching on a daily basis? I mean, I think that's really the big question.
I mean, I would just say that I think as these prices are coming down for renewables, I'm hopeful that we'll end up with a market structure, pricing carbon, and let people compete. And I understand it might be more multilateral in 2 ways. The grid, somebody has to figure out how to pay for the grid, because part of what's occurring right now is that we've taken a century-old policy of taking a really high fixed cost infrastructure and variabilizing people's bills, which are providing a lot of false signals right now as people are putting behind the market because they're looking at a variabilized fixed cost, which isn't going anywhere and that has to be paid for. But eventually that will work through that, and more competition is good. But there's no scenario that I can come up with that for a long time where you're not going to have some kind of fossil backup. As Gordon lived in a very real way, you could eventually sit on top of snow tails and mainland, 4-hour batteries and not going to get you.
Yeah, and operationally, the worst period in the winter is the early morning where you have extreme power utilization ramp. The solar just cannot handle winter morning because it's dark. It's just not going to happen. And even, you know, the wind might kick in, but you can't have enough renewable to cover that. It's just not going to happen. Not in the near future, at least.
Thank you. Next.
Another European, Jean-Michel Gachan, France Gulf region. I'm a bit older than the former. I did meet Andy 15 years ago at PCM headquarters. All the keywords did disappear today. So I will want to check if the keywords disappear or if they are reframed in a different way. The first one was the governance. Do we need an ISO? Do we need an RTO? What's the best? And parallel to this, how to write the good algorithm to incorporate new territories in a nodal frame. Big thing for Andy at this time. The second basket was market power, market surveillance, how to get rid of suspicions we had against some companies. And parallel to this, how to get the transmission grid investments to operate for the market itself and not for each state in this multi-jurisdiction frame. Is this gone at PJM, New England, or even for you, Calpine?
I want to make sure I get a question from that. Pardon me, but what is specifically your question?
4 things totally disappeared today from the discussion. Even the words are not used.
Okay.
ISO, RTO. Do we have a better frame for the issues we are facing? Algorithms. How to write the good nodal system to incorporate new territories in a market. Third, market power, market surveillance. How to get sure that they operate smoothly, all of them. And fourth, how to get the transmission grid organized for the market itself and not from the different states controlling the different grid owners.
Okay, well, we could take a long time answering all 4 of those, but why don't you
Oh,
pick a little bit?
I'll do a rapid fire response. I don't see a better structure at the moment than ISOs and RTOs, particularly the multi-state jurisdiction. So in the context of the US, I think that persists. I think all the ISOs have done a really good job on transmission. So the reason you don't hear much about transmission these days is I think we've made significant investments in transmission. I think on the algorithm side of things, the algorithmic intensity is increasing as we deal with the increased complexity. And then I think finally the issue of surveillance and market power hasn't gone away. That's a big discussion we just didn't have time to get to today. In regions like New England where you have these fuel constraints, arguably you make the market power situation worse.
Thank you.
Thanks
Think we
to
have
you.
time for
That's fine.
another question.
Sorry, thank you again, European and terrible accent. My question is more simple, probably. Question to Gordon. I cannot understand how the price of gas you paid at some time for electricity generation was, if I well understand, $80 per million BTU. While I explain to the students everywhere that the price of gas in the US is extremely low. And of course, I understand that from the Henry up to the north, etc., you need a few more dollars, but how can you explain this? And very short, if we have enough time, another question to your neighbor, which is, you intend to build something like 70 gigawatt of capacity in the next years. This is more than the total capacity in sub-Saharan Africa, and this is something like nearly the total capacity of a typical European country. Thank you.
Yeah, so on that chart I showed you, you could see the gas at source in Pennsylvania, which isn't too far away from New England, and it's typically in the $2-3 range. It spiked up to $5 to $6 in that winter period. The $80 really comes from the last over-the-counter trade in that day. So what's not transparent, you know, the electric markets are exceedingly transparent. The gas markets are less so. And so there's a lot of trading happening over the counter, and what you're seeing is the last posted gas trade, and that means somebody paid that price, not everybody. But for purposes of pricing in the electricity market, you will use the highest price in the gas market as the reference point. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
we do have a day-ahead market and a real-time market, so those are the real-time prices. And a lot of the prices settle on a day-ahead basis and would probably not have been at that high a price. That's the key.
And capacity.
You're putting enough investment to
Just
equal the
explaining.
entire capacity of sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah,
Just
I
sort
mean,
of getting a sense of comparison of the amount of electricity developed.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, the scale of the market's enormous, and I think the competition was enormous. And I think what we saw, and we still have it right now, even though the market's oversupplied, I mean, we're getting, 5,000, 6,000 megawatts of new gas plants coming on consistently for now, I think, going on 6 years, and I think it's extending. So now it's not happening all at once, but it's a pretty much sustained investment, and a lot of it again comes back to, I think, confidence that the gas supply situation in that part of the world in PJM is so attractive that they think they can compete out the coals and nukes. And again, if that's true, if people will let the coals and nukes go, it's probably right. But it is a tremendous fuel swap and tremendous investment, absolutely. Markets work.
One last question, please, because I'll say one comment. The country of Nigeria that now has over 200 million people has I'm sorry. I was going to say, actually, it's nameplate 6,000 megawatts, but in fact, on a given day, it's more like 4,000 megawatts. So it's really an astonishing amount of electrification that Africa needs. Please, go ahead.
Hi, I do also have an accent, sorry. So, it's surprising to hear that you're saying that the energy-only market is viable in ERCOT. 4 years ago, they implemented the ORDC curve, and it's to me, it sounds like we need some extra capacity. We need to figure out how to bring that. We're going to implement this, we're going to see how this works. On top of that, you're saying, okay, energy-only market is viable because we have price spikes. These price spikes are going to attract additional investment. But at the end of the day, you're saying, okay, all the Texans are paying a lot in the summer to have additional capacity. So at the end of the day, you're going to have huge volatility in the electricity prices. Is that, do you think is viable?
Well, I mean, the energy-only market has been in place now since 2001. So there's 17 years of track record. And there have been, I don't know what the combined number is, but I would guess 50,000 megawatts of generation investment in a market. There's a peak of just under 75,000. So far, it has clearly worked through economic cycles, through high gas prices and low gas prices. You mentioned that the ORDC curve is a technical thing I was trying to avoid in my earlier answer, which is, there's the risk of price volatility, which you mentioned, and so far the political will has been there, because prices go up, the capital flows, and prices come back down, and people get used to the cycles. It kind of works. The ORDC, there's another concern, which is you don't get prices that are high enough to simply investment until you're already out of capacity, because there's a 3-year build time, 2 years depending on the technology. That's not enough time to respond to price signals. And so there's something, for those of you who don't know, called the ORDC, the Operational Reserve Demand Curve. And all that it tries to do is it tries to using an algorithm, algorithm's the wrong word, but an approach, tries to pull forward energy pricing to be more responsive when we start to run out of capacity, even if the actual generator bids don't show it. So there's definitely an administrative technical fix to enable the energy market to work. That is under review to continue modifying that. So I think it will continue to evolve. These are technical changes, as I mentioned earlier. But I do think so far the evidence is, to continue to produce lots of investment in renewable and energy.
Just one comment. I agree with you, but margins are shrinking these days in Texas.
Margins are
reserve margins.
Reserve margins are shrinking. They're shrinking, but the forward prices have come back up high. And right now, there's a lot of wind and there's some solar development going on too. So we'll have to see. Reserve margins have shrunk before prices come up and people invest.
Marcus, good.
And I have no doubt that we'll end up seeing investment and go forward. Basically, there's some technical tweaks, but the state is behind it, and I think it can work, but it's going to require management. It's not exactly pure. that I think it will.
Well, thank you very much. And before we clap, I want to say one other comment about thanks, not just to the gentleman on this panel, but I think most of us do not appreciate what the management and the staffs of the ISOs do across the country. The fact that we have the reliable system we have operating under extraordinary circumstances, and usually it's not even known at all by consumers, but nonetheless, the lights stay on and the system works. It's really an extraordinary accomplishment. And what they're now grappling with market design, all the issues make it even more complicated, more difficult. But these teams, working very quietly and without a lot of fanfare, get their jobs done. So when you're clapping for the CEOs and for Thad, I want you to also clap for the extraordinary quality of the staff and management of the ISOs and what they do.